we've got to be embracing of people being successful in New Zealand. If you want schools, if you want new hospitals, if you want roads, rail, whatever it is, the government needs funding for that. And that comes from multiple sources: personal tax, business tax, GST primarily. And most of that means that you've got to have a successful economy, and that's why your earlier question about the settings is so important. We've got to have the right settings. But we've got to welcome those people because, by the way, they get wealthy because they offer a product or service that people want, first of all. But secondly, when they grow businesses, they grow a whole ecosystem alongside them. It's not just one person that benefits. It's a whole ecosystem within the company or their suppliers. You know, if you think about Rocket Lab as an example, who has created so much value for New Zealand, not just in terms of, you know, the space exploration, all that sort of stuff, but, you know, they have, I think now 1,600 approved suppliers in New Zealand. They've had to lift all of them up past the stage of being a manufacturer for a medical facility or medical device. They've got to get to a rocket level, which is an even higher standard. All they've done is they've helped improve the productivity, the skill sets, obviously the wages of the people employed in those businesses. That's why you've got to look at them not as, oh, that's a very wealthy person, but actually what is the wealth creation they've done for New Zealand? And we should celebrate that. We don't.
Why do you think New Zealanders have a, I don't know, tall poppy type attitude?
It's extraordinary. In sport we don't, but in business we have this approach which is extraordinary because you know, what are the long-lasting generational benefits of having successful businesses that provide money to the economy, create high-paying jobs so families can build, get enough money so they can buy a house, all those sort of stuff, that social connection that comes with that. We just simply don't do it, and it's a weird thing in New Zealand. You don't see it overseas.
Is one of the things, I mean, housing is a big factor in wealth in New Zealand, and one of the big arguments might be that without having had a capital gains tax, too much easy wealth has gone to New Zealanders who have invested in property and taken a bet on property, and that's worked out well for them, and there's a lot of other New Zealanders who feel they can't get into a house.
Yeah, well, you talked about 1987 crash, and you're right, a whole generation of people chose after that event not to invest in shares. So we've had lots of older people who then said, well, what's the next thing? I can't buy shares. They've gone into housing. So that's driven a lot of the house investment because people want to have bricks and mortar and it's relatively easy to sell. We've got to get back to the stage where capital markets is investing in the stock exchange is a much more viable option. So to put it in context, you know, the stock exchange is worth just under 200 billion. The housing stock in New Zealand is worth several trillion. And so just making sure that we've got the right framework where we're getting investment in the productive sector of New Zealand, as opposed to what I'd say, it's great that...
But wouldn't a capital gains tax be one way to do that? In terms of, it's often argued by tax experts that that's a key factor in people choosing to put their money in property as opposed to shares or elsewhere.
No, it may be one contributing factor, and people have got a view around whether we should put a capital gains tax. Obviously, we don't agree with that. But I'd argue too that we've also disincentivised. We haven't actually created the environment for people to think that investing in the productive part of New Zealand is actually more important.
Just finally, what do you think the impact would be on a country like New Zealand if we were to implement a wealth tax? I don't think many other countries have actually done it in that form, but we don't have an inheritance tax either. If we were to go down that road, would it have what would the impacts on capital flow and those sort of things?
Well, people have choices, don't they? And wealthier people, and I'm not talking about extraordinarily wealthy people, but wealthier people or people with prospects have an opportunity and they choose by leaving their place. So unfortunately right now we're seeing a lot of very highly skilled New Zealanders, not necessarily wealthy, leaving our shores. You will have people who literally will go, I will take my business out of New Zealand. And what that will mean is ultimately we're poorer in a financial sense, we've got less taxes, but we'll lose less job opportunities for high-paying jobs, all the ecosystem that goes with that. That is what will be so damaging if you start doing things like that. Because people, you know, people who run successful businesses have choice. I had businesses that I operate in New Zealand or Australia, and we moved to Singapore, parts of it. And so, you have choice where you want to locate your businesses. And we've got to create an environment where not only do New Zealanders want to remain and be successful here in this country, but also how we're going to attract the right sort of capital from overseas.